Okay, well, in the background here, I'm not speaking to the PowerPoint, but I've just got some of my books and some of my journey, and at the end, or probably the last half of it, there's photographs of the lovely places where I go to research my books, and that's the best part of my journey, getting to see our wonderful country, even though the first half are in Italy, we'll just disregard them. I first went to a public library when I was 4 years old, which is quite a while ago. My mother took me to Annie Public Library in Brisbane and introduced me to the world of books and stories and reading and writing. And it began my lifelong love affair with the written word. And I'll be forever grateful to my mum. I can still remember the bottom shelf in Annie Library, 4 years old, where I was allowed to go and pick my books. And the highlight of my week was going to the library and taking books back and getting new ones. So my desire to write was born at a very early age. At 11, I wrote my first novel, and somehow in all of our moves from Queensland to New South Wales, it got lost. But I do remember the first sentence was, "Julia stopped hopping abruptly," broke all the rules of correct writing and editing. Don't know what the story was about. I then wrote a short story when I was 33, because in the interim I had education, marriage, children, career, further education, more education, change of jobs, and when I retired due to a difficult workplace, when I was 55, I thought it's now or never. If I'm going to write, I'm going to do it now. That was 6 years ago, and I've written I think I'm up to my 28th book in the last 6 years. Some of them are coming up here, you've seen the covers go up there. I'm what they call a hybrid author. I started off with a contract with a digital publisher in America, and I thought I was the bee's knees. Through the Romance Writers of Australia in 2011, I made lots of friends. I say I found my tribe. I found all these like-minded people who think the same way that I do, and who love to live in their heads with all of their characters, and who get such a buzz out of writing. So in 2011, in what we call the sprint room, which is a bit like NaNoWriMo or it was called 50K in 30 days, which meant you wrote 50,000 words in 30 days. You got into a chat room at night and somebody went crack with the whip and you just had to sprint. And you wrote and you wrote and you wrote. Now, I wrote the book that flashed up there a little while ago called A Holiday Affair, because when I was a high school principal, that was the last final promotion I had in my going out to work career, I would come home so stressed, I would run a bubble bath up to my neck, I would pour a glass of wine, and I'd grab a Mills and Boon. That was my release from dealing with builders, parents, children, staff, whoever else wanted to bother me during my day. And I kept thinking, I can do this, I can write a Mills and Boon, I'm sure I can do it. So in 2011, in the RWA Sprint Room, I wrote Her Pacific Pirate. And I thought it was pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. I sent it off to Mills and Boon after pitching to them at the RWA conference in 2011. I still remember the editor said, "Oh, I like the sound of this, send me the first 3 chapters." A few years later, when I was working as an editor for one of these US publishing companies, I also took pictures at RWA and discovered that everybody says, "Oh, that sounds good, send me the first 3 chapters." Very rarely do they say, "It sounds awful." So I sent the first 3 chapters off to Mills and Boon. I felt very clever that I had written a whole 50,000 word novel. That was, to me, was a big achievement. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. I'm not the world's most patient person. I have a fridge magnet that my sister gave me that says, "If it wasn't for the last minute in this house, nothing would ever get done." And that's the way I operate in my writing and my editing. So I thought, okay, I'll send it off to some other publishers. At the time, there was a publishing company called Entangle Publishing in the States, who were a beginning publisher, and they were taking manuscripts from romance authors all over the world. On the 21st of December 2011, I went running into our bedroom at 6 a.m. one morning and crying, and my husband said, "What's the matter?" Because I get up and check my email. "Who's died? What's wrong?" And I went, "Somebody wants to buy my book." Entangle Publishing offered me a contract. Now, I didn't know anything about digital publishing, I didn't know anything about self-publishing, I didn't know anything about traditional publishing. Someone wanted to buy my book that I'd written in a month. Still hadn't heard from Mills and Boon, so that was quite heartening to know that someone wanted it. You know, if you're an author, realise that when you sub to publishers, it depends on the editor, it depends on what they're looking for, it depends whether they've had a fight with their husband or their wife that morning, whether they're running late and they haven't had lunch, or they haven't had a coffee, or they've had too much coffee. It's so subjective, so don't give up is what I'm saying. So since Holiday Affair and Winter of the Passion Flower hit Amazon US, I've published my 12th book with Entangle Publishing, comes out on Monday. I've written a little series set in the western red dust of New South Wales, and the US readers are lapping it up. When I last did my obsessive compulsive rank check about 10 minutes before I got out of the car, it was ranked at 270, I think, on Amazon Australia. It's climbing the US charts. There's another 2 books in that series, so that'll give me 14 with Entangled. I've got the 3 print books with Pan Macmillan. I've got a 2-book deal that I've just signed with HarperCollins for 2 books with Harlequin Mirror that you don't know, that's new since my time in Winton. And I've self-published about 9 books, I think, and I've got another one coming out on the 9th of November. In my spare time, I edit for, my children are grown and gone. I don't go to work. I sit at my desk from 7:30 till 4:30 every day, and I treat it as a job. And that's how I get the words out. And I do editing for other authors internationally, and I've made some wonderful friends. When I was in London, after I went to Italy to my writer's workshop, I went to London and met all my editing clients. They all came into, we couldn't get into the big flash one where you do a high tea, is that the Ritz. We went to Park Lane, I think it was, and all had high tea together. And it was so English and so lovely. I've met some of my editing clients when I went over to the States. I went over to an Entangle Publishing business meeting my 2nd year of writing. And I've made so many friends in the Australian community writing. So in a nutshell, that's my 6-year writing journey. I've got so many more books in my head. I don't think I'll have the years left in me to get them all out, but my next book is set up in this region. At the moment, it doesn't have a title. It's set in Bowen in World War II and contemporary times, having a look at an Adani-like company who wants to put a coal loader down right at Early Beach. And the link between the 1943 characters and the contemporary characters isn't revealed until the last chapter. And I'm really pleased to say that my super, super tough husband shed a tear when he read the last chapter. I went, yes, I've nailed it.
So do you do research on that? And so how much time do you spend
on the road?
Doing research and writing?
Well, my husband actually chimed in at the Bowen talk today, and someone was asking about, how much research I did, and he said, well, this is the longest she's ever taken to write a book. Kakadu, Daintree and Diamond Scry I wrote in about 3 months each, but the Whitsundays book, which as yet hasn't got a title, took me about 7 months, because I did lots of research on World War II. I don't know if any of you know the National Library Trove resource. You can see any newspaper from any town right through the 18 and 1900s. So I'd start reading a newspaper article on something that happened in Queen Street, Brisbane in 1943, And instead of taking my notes, then I'd read the next article, and I'd read the whole newspaper. So that was very, very fascinating doing the research. And of course we have to do the travel. Oh, and at that point in 2015, we headed off to the Daintree, and after that we went off to the East Kimberleys. But because the Whitsundays really required a lot of research, I had to make 4 visits to Airlie Beach this year in our trusty caravan. And the beauty of the Whitsundays research is that I got onto a lot of local people, or I won't say a lot, probably half a dozen local gentlemen who were either in their early teens or early 20s in Proserpine and Cannon Valley, as it was called in those days, during World War II. And they were an absolute mine of information. Little things telling me that on Boxing Day every year, the locals from Proserpine and Cannon Valley and all the farms used to go to Cannon Valley Beach for a picnic. And so the children could swim, the fishermen would row out as the tide started to come in and have a young boy at the front of the boat with nets, and they'd scoop the box jellyfish out of the water and put them in the boat so the children could swim. So if you get to read my Whitsundays book, there's a lovely scene where Jack, who comes from New South Wales, said, "What are they doing?" And they're getting the box jellyfish. What are they? And he didn't know anything about it. So we've spent a lot of time at Bowen researching the Catalina hard stand where the flying boats used to come in World War II. And we went to Winton, where I met the lovely Kit in June this year. And on the way we stopped in Longreach. And the last time we'd been to the Qantas Museum, there wasn't a Catalina there. And luckily we called in this year. And there's a Catalina there now, and I got to crawl through a Catalina that is one of the main characters in my book. And I'd been in there about 15 minutes with the camera, taking lots of photos. A Catalina flying boat.
Okay.
Flying boats. And I started to cry. And I said, "Oh, what now?" When Jack was in the plane, it's not like when we're in comfy plane. He had to lie down on this cold metal in this little space and look through that little... You know, my characters become very real to me. And I got really upset that the plane was so uncomfortable. He's very much used to me. I live in my head a lot of the time. And as we've been at Airlie Beach this week, every time I drive past Cannon Valley Beach, which I will still call it Cannon Valley Beach, I sort of look like this to see if I can remember where Auntie Tat's house would have been and where the poinciana trees were. Poinciana trees were. And I've decided it was probably near where the Fat Frog restaurant is now. And to me, it's very real. That house existed in my mind. Those people exist for me. And I think that's the clue to being a successful author. When I'm writing, and when you begin writing, you tell a story. You're telling the story. When you make that mind shift somewhere in the process, when you get more experience, your characters are telling their story through you. And you're pretty much the conduit for their stories to be told. And when I wrote one scene in the Whitsundays book, and I do wish it had a title so I could tell you what it's going to be, I sat there, I was crying so much, I couldn't see the screen, I couldn't see the keyboard, I had a box of tissues and I'd get more and I'd have to wipe, and the tissues were all around me because it was a very sad scene, but I was totally immersed in it. One of my other books, one of my earlier Entangle books, Italian Affair, I love rereading it because it makes me cry every time. Even though I know what happens because I wrote it, I still cry when it gets to the sad part. So I think as an author, that's something else you need to be so aware of, to tap into people's emotions, to get those emotions going so that you're portraying your character, they're coming through you, and your readers become that character as they're reading it. And that's when you get to the end of a book and you don't want to leave it. You don't want to leave them to be by themselves. You want to know what's going to happen. when I wrote the epilogue in Diamond Sky, I was devastated. The Porter sisters are now on their own. They're out in the world and I don't have any say in what happens to them in the future. So for those of you who are authors, emotion and making your characters come alive through all different sorts of really structural mechanisms with writing, with not using what we call filter words. You wouldn't say, Mary watched the car pull up in the driveway, because you're then putting a layer between the character and the reader. You're telling the reader that Mary watched something. You need to get the reader into Mary's head and through Mary's eyes, and you know, Mary's skin crawled as the car drove to a slow halt, you know, and the reader's immediately thinking, oh, she's scared, what's happening in the car? So the words like watched, felt, heard, there's lots and lots of words we call filter words. So if you're writing a manuscript, make sure you don't have those filter words in there. We use lots of filler words because when we're writing, we have to have our manuscripts a certain length. And if you look at a manuscript and you go through and you removed every just, really, actually, that makes no difference at all to the meaning. So you have to be very careful with those sorts of words. You also have to be aware of showing what's happening, not telling, so that you get the reader feeling again. And you know, if you're an author, all of those things will enrich your manuscript. You also need to have correct grammar, spelling, punctuation, formatting, and it's a big job. And I really enjoy working with my editorial clients because I've learned so much over the last 6 years through my hybrid experience. I now mentor aspiring authors, and I don't charge them. People email me and I say, you know, what do you think I should do with this? And I'll do this. I charge for editing and proofreading, but if someone's just seeking advice off me, it brightens up my day. It means I'm not sitting there alone with my computer and only the dog occasionally to keep me company. I get to talk to people.
And do you think you've learned things from having been published with the big publishing houses that you just wouldn't have learned?
I have learned that you do not join two sentences with a conjunction and. You have a full stop and a new sentence. I've learned that you do not tell a show, which is the way to write, and then tell the reader what you've just shown them. My editor goes, I'm learning that as I go, and I'm trying to be conscious of that. I've learned that when you finish writing a book before you send it off, you listen to it, because I always get thought, though, and through mixed up. My fingers type the wrong word. When I proofread it, my brain reads what it should be and not what it is. So I have lots of characters going, thought the door, or she was thinking and she threw, what could she do? So you download a free reading application and you put chapters into it and it reads it back to you.
And obviously we've got some photos, so you like your photography as well?
Yes, I love my photography, and unfortunately my camera died about 3 days ago. I was out on a boat out of the lovely Airlie Beach, and I don't know if it got overheated or the battery died, and I had my phone in the car today taking photos. My husband was looking at me and I said, I'm going to try and get a battery in Townsville. He said, surely you can cope for a week or so without your camera. And I said, no, look at that beautiful tree. I wanted to take a photo of that tree and I didn't have my camera to zoom into it. So these are all my photos, most of them with my camera and some with my phone.
And do you ever take photos to use on covers of your books?
Yes. Suzanne Bellamy, who is a Australian rural romance author, I edit her books and I do all of her covers. And the outback covers on each of her books are some of my photos that I've blown up and used the backgrounds for.
Fantastic. And is that something you enjoy doing when you go independent, when you publish your own books, that you get control of everything?
I love doing covers. I had a client email me the other day to say, did I have time to do covers? And I said, I always have time to do people's covers because that's downtime for me. I love playing with photos, and I'll be watching something on television at night, and I'll be there with the laptop on the lap and just manipulating images and trying fonts, and it's a great relaxation. You're not thinking of words or characters or showing and telling and filler words. You're just playing with pretty pictures. That was after the cyclone on Whitsunday Island. It was taken in April, that one. Yeah, so...
Fantastic. So what's some of the best advice you think you could give an aspiring author?
The best advice I can give is to be determined, have determination in bucket loads. You'll see a little recipe, the last slide of this. I'll stop the PowerPoint when we get to it. Determination. And that just doesn't go for writing. To achieve anything in life, whatever you want to do, you have to have that determination. Have passion. Be passionate. Have confidence in yourself. You can do it. It's just having that determination and passion and a little bit of talent. Doesn't have to be a lot. And as they say, some words are better than a blank page. Bum on seat, fingers on keyboard. Determination, passion, and follow your dream. I've actually written a blog post called that if you Google it, and it tells you a little bit more about my journey and having the passion and the determination to follow it. Get your work edited if you're serious about getting published. Now, it depends what you want as an author. Some people are quite happy to say, I've written my book and have nobody else read it, just to finish a book and have a book written. It's a huge achievement. Some people with A-type personalities want to be the best-selling author in the world. Then you have to be very, very determined. But it's following your own dream. Be true to yourself, make sure you've got a quality product, and be passionate about it.